Hey Neppers, it's me, Wild Neptune. Very exciting, we finally have new evergreen PvE content in Rift. If you want to see more guides like this, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I noticed a lot of you are not hitting that button, and I would appreciate it if you do so. Anyway, this is going to be a doozy, so let's go. Now, to get into the Rift, you do have to be somewhere in episode 5, so it is very late game. It is definitely catered towards end game players. Right now, it's a fire unit only season, and seasons last for quite a while, so you do have a long time to complete this, but it is pretty slow going. I have done a lot of testing and a lot of farming already, and I'm nowhere close to done at all, so it is a long haul thing. Some things of note. You can select 4 sets. In fact, you have to select 4 sets. I chose these 4. These are the ones that I need, but you can mix and match anything you want to. You also have your Rift controller. These are basically how many turns you can stay in the Rift. Also, as you get these fragments and stuff, you can select bonuses. The first one you get after you defeat the boss one time, and we'll talk about these in a little bit, but as you progress, you get stronger and stronger, and the boss becomes, well, easier and easier. So, nice little progression there. As you fight the boss, your team gets stronger, it gets bonuses and stuff like that over the course of a season. You also get increased stats too. Right here says increased damage for every level, I believe is 4% bonus damage that you get increased, which is pretty nice. And there are also these season rewards. See right here, we have some reforged materials, we have some boxes, we have some transmit stones, mod things, we have more transmit stones, and at the very end, we have a reversion mana stone, which is the big prize for getting to the end of the season. As I said, this is a fire unit only boss, so you must use fire units. And you're probably going to have to use some you've never used before. I know I have. Anyway, I have tried several different units and several different teams, and I'll walk you through them. What's good about some of them, what's not so good about some of them, some risks you might want to take, and also show their gear overall. So anyway, let's get looking at the first team, the one I have right here. Fine. The boss will always prioritize the frontline unit. So having this candlestick here for decreased cooldown is pretty nice. There are other options too, but for this particular team, when a Soul Weaver especially is in the front line, this is going to be nice to have. Unfortunately, mine's only plus 15, but I pull more eventually, I will upgrade this. But I would say that 220 ER, I think is a sweet spot. It might be 215, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I do know that 200 still gets hit by the increased cooldown. And we'll talk about the mechanics of the boss while we're actually in the fight, so you see that in action there. But this stat line, I would say, is pretty good. I could be a little bit bulkier, maybe. Sometimes I do get in danger of dying, but this is a pretty difficult fight. As for Mercedes, this is another unit you get for free. So just a speed set with some damage overall. You can opt going like faster for more turns. However, I have found that I like having more attack and more crit damage overall, even if I sacrifice a little bit of speed for that. Now, this is pretty good gear, but if you're at this stage, you should have gear that is comparable, I would say. Haste is probably the unit that most people do not have built. I had to build him, so the important things here are you get his effect chance on his S3 and also on the S1, and if anything here, put a couple in here for the S2. Now, for the EE for him, I would say you want to increase the defense chance, especially if you use this team where he's the only defense breaker. This is because if you fail the defense break on the S3 and on the S1, your damage for that run is like shot. You are not going to be having a good time. In fact, it might cost you an entire additional run to clear the boss if you miss those defense breaks. So you want to give you the best chance of hitting them. Anyway, for the stat line, you need 105 effectiveness to debuff the boss efficiently. 15% still exists, unfortunately, but those are the numbers here. He has to be reasonably fast. I would say 230 or so is the min speed I would really be comfortable with. This HP and defense, you can like move it around a little bit here, but he has to be like kind of not super squish, but he does have to do a little bit of damage too if we want to beat the boss in a reasonable amount of time. As for his artifact, if he's the sole debuffer, you really want to have Torn Sleeve on him. If you have another debuffer, and some other teams will have a secondary debuffer, then you can use another artifact like RNL. Violet Talisman is decent too. So there's that other one like Alabastron, I think it is, that is also decent. That lowers the effectiveness number you have to reach for him. So those are all options you can use for Haste. The final unit we have looking at here is going to be our Bomb model Kanna. Now, she's another unit that you can get in your connection, so another one available to everybody. Now, if you do not have Bloodstone, I would not use her. The reason why she is good here is because she's a ranger that can use Bloodstone. She also has a speed buff and attack buff for your team. Also, she only has an S3 and an S1, so when you have the Rip Fragment bonus that gives you a attack down on the boss for a basic attack, she will use the S3, then cycle back around and use the S1. This is not always the case with some units that you have, so she's especially well suited to do that little mechanic there. Anyway, these are the stats that I have in her right now. 190 speed is basically the minimum speed I'd be comfortable with having her on. This means that with her speed buff, she will be able to take 2 turns before the boss will get his 10 debuff / buff limit, so she can actually land that attack down in the first place. Anyway, enough talk about the units, let's get into the fight. So here we go, Haste is going right now, and hopefully we'll land the defense break here, maybe a couple of beads, and we do. So, every time we take a move, the boss will get a small CR push, and also see right there. This is why RNL is kind of risky sometimes, as it can kind of mess up your ordering and stuff like that. But we get the Kanna bomb right here. And you notice too that the boss right now is only hitting the front unit, but this is here. So every 5 times you hit the boss, you extend all your debuffs by 1 turn, and the boss counters with an AoE. The AoE does like okay damage. It's not really anything special like that, but notice here too, these blue buffs here, and these are buffs where, well, we'll read them here. When attacking, penetrates the target's defense by 15% per stack. So, yes, a lot of defense penetration for this boss. But you see right here, we are doing pretty good damage, and you'll notice here that there is a 10 buff and debuff limit. What you want to do is at the beginning of the fight, try to stack as many debuffs as possible so the boss gets less of these stacks. I would say that 6 is basically a minimum for the start of the battle, and anything more than that is really, really good. Later on though, as the fight continues, you might come into like a situation where you only have like 5 debuffs, sometimes even 4 if you get pretty unlucky. So, now, maybe we'll see it here, I'm not sure, but if the front unit is hit and goes below 50% HP, when hit, the boss will do AoE damage to like a splash damage, so that you have to watch out for too. And when the boss uses ultimate, he does decrease cooldowns of all debuffs that he has, so he's right there, they all kind of went away a little bit there. And now we want to try to stack some more. This is where some of the RNG takes place, as you can't always guarantee that your units will have their skills up and everything when the boss does that. I mean, you can manual it, right? But who has time for that? So, but right here, it looks like we're doing okay. We have gotten to basically the almost like over halfway point here. So notice this right here too. Let me actually turn off the auto for a second. So right here, you will notice that there's this 12, and that is simply how many more turns we have before we are kicked out of the fight. And when we kicked out, the boss's HP that he has left is saved, and then we can go back in for a reduced energy cost. If we fail the fight, well, nothing happens. The fight doesn't get saved. However, we lose a entry, and we only have 3 fails. So after the 3rd fail, we are kicked out forever. Well, not forever. We have to restart the fight again, and from max HP, and we lose all of the energy that we spent, and we don't get any of our Rift energy and stuff like that to upgrade our team. So it is in your best interest to try to not fail 3 times and have a consistent team to beat the boss, even if you have to maybe spend 20 more energy to do so. So that was the end of the fight. And see right here, the boss's HP went down to about 65%. So we did a little over a third, which is pretty good, as I think getting this right now done within 3 attempts is a nice goal to have. We can also look at our damage, stuff like that. So for our damage, our Mercedes obviously is our main DPS. So she's going to do the bulk of the damage right there. Our Haste and our Kanna are about even, and they both have also contributed some healing too. And the Hazel also do some healing, also doing a lot of buffing and stuff like that. So yeah, a pretty good setup right there. Now you can also use Fire Charlotte. Charlotte is a nice frontline because she's unaffected basically by the increased cooldown, as she is a fighting spirit unit. For this team too, Tamarin or what's the name, Hazel also works here. You don't have to use Candlestick as it's not in the front. So use something like Tome is pretty good. You could also use Touch of Rekos. That's another nice option you can have here. Tamarin, I find, is a little bit safer in terms of overall healing, but you will definitely do more damage with Mascot Hazel. But let's see how this one goes. I should look at the stats, I guess. So this is a Charlotte. This is squishy, definitely. So we will be taking more damage from the boss's mechanic when she's under 50% health. This is okay because Tamarin will have her S2 every other turn in order to heal us back up. If I'm using Hazel, I would probably change her to be a little bit tankier overall. And so the Tamarin, these are basic Tamarin stats that you have. This is just the one I use for my other PvE content. Anyway, let's see how this one goes. Now, typically, this one does a little bit less damage overall than the first team, if I'm not mistaken. There's a little more variance, I would say. I think the Hazel version actually does comparable damage, but it is kind of risky overall. Watch, maybe I'll do like, 35% damage this time. But you see this version in action here, and most of it is largely going to be the same. We actually have this time 7 debuffs, which is 1 more than we had last time, which is going to help increase our tankiness and help us a little bit in the fight here. So see right here too, Charlotte on the lifesteal stat. I don't know how necessary lifesteal is on the Charlotte. It does help her heal a little bit, and I think that's kind of useful. It's more that she doesn't need any crit chance, so you might as well have it on her. The boss also does like a burn and stuff like that, which is kind of annoying, but we can deal with it. One of the weaknesses of Tamarin is that she doesn't cleanse the burns on her S2, and the boss will detonate the burns also on the ultimate, so that is kind of a problem there. But usually at the speed of Tamarin at, she should be S3ing about right now. Okay, yep, see, there we go. And the burns are all gone. And one of the issues though with using a unit like Tamarin that takes extra turns is that it does take a turn on your turn cycle, which is why your overall damage is going to be a little bit lower usually. Not only that, but you also probably noticed that you cannot dual attack on this fight, so Tamarin's S1 really doesn't do anything. And there is the boss's ultimate, very cool looking and everything like that. So we see here, we did 35%, so we did a little bit under 1/3, so definitely less damage overall. However, it was a relatively safe run, I would say, with the Tamarin. Again, using the Hazel would probably make it do about the same amount of damage, maybe even more damage, but it would be a little more dangerous overall. So we see the stats here, like the damage done. In this case, again, the Mercedes is a big damage dealer. The Charlotte and the Haste are about equal overall, and the combat support and everything like that. So that's how that team fares overall. So again, less damage if you use Tamarin. However, in my opinion, probably a little bit safer. Another unit you might want to consider is Elphelt. So Elphelt is a limited unit, so unfortunately, not many players will have access to her, at least if you're watching this and you're newer and you're just getting into this mode. However, if you do have her, a couple things to take note of. One is that you must have Song of Stars. The reason you want to use her is for access to Song of Stars. This puts a target debuff on the enemy, and this does 10% more damage from every single source, which is very, very nice. She also acts as a secondary defense breaker. So in case your Haste fails his defense break, you have your Elphelt too. Because you have a target debuff also, and you also want to possibly land that attack down, for this fight, you want to swap Haste off a Torn Sleeve if you have that, and onto something else. In this case, I'm using Violet Talisman, but something like RNL, something like that also works. Mercedes is going to be your mainstay DPS. She will probably be in the team for every single fight, and for the front line, I have the Hazel here. There's also a variant of this. What you can do is you can put your Elphelt in front instead, and basically front load your defense break and stuff like that, because she will be continually hit by the increased cooldown over and over again, and put your Hazel in the back instead, and use something like, say, your Touch of Rekos to get some AoE healing when the boss procs his AoE. That's also another thing you might want to do. So let's see how this team fares, and we will go into it. This particular fight, the Elphelt will go first, and will hopefully defense break the boss, and target the boss too. So instantly 2 debuffs, just a defense break, but do we get a target? Okay, we get a target because he has 2 chances, it does take that extra turn. Now, again, worth noting, like Tamarin, her taking 2 turns does mean that somebody else is not taking a turn to do more damage. So maybe I should get a little more damage on my Elphelt. I'll look into doing that maybe in a little bit here. But I would say this team is definitely one of the more dangerous ones, though. It is a little bit squishier overall, but hopefully that is just perfectly fine. And see right here, we have our 7 debuffs, and we have some prime debuffs too. So we have target, attack down, defense break. We also have this vampiric touch, which is really nice because it helps us stay a little bit healthier overall. So we basically have the prime debuffs that we want on the boss. Now, while this is going, let's talk about some of the debuffs that the boss cannot be affected by. So we have, you cannot decrease speed. That would be kind of broken. You also cannot poison it, which will also be kind of broken. There is no provoke, obviously. There is also no silence, cannot be buffable. No restrict. If you could restrict this boss, I think that would be like the most broken debuff you could put on this particular one here. Anyway, see right here that my team is taking a little more damage than the other ones were, but we are still going over pretty strong here, as the Hazel is doing a pretty good job at keeping us alive. Anyway, I'm going to skip forward to the end of this one here and show one other team. So in this run, we actually got a lot closer than I thought we were going to get. The bonus target damage did quite a bit, and I do think that my Elphelt was on a more damaging build. I could have actually done this, and actually, well, defeated the boss on the 3rd attempt. Anyway, the next one will be pretty quick, so I'll skip over that one and go into the next team. However, let's look at the battle results here and see our damage overall. Again, the Mercedes is going to be the big damage dealer, and here is the Haste. See, the Haste's damage is a lot higher because he really benefited from that target damage that the Elphelt allowed us to do. So maybe make a more damaging Elphelt, and I can have even quicker clears. This final team here is the only one I have that does not use Haste. And this is just because maybe you don't have Haste built and don't want to build him for this. Even though if you do have him, I highly recommend you do so because he does seem to be like a best in slot unit, at least until Kane comes out. And I have seen Kane, we'll talk about him in another video, but he does seem particularly tuned for this content. This one also does use Elphelt also. It is very important you have a defense breaker, and Elphelt does that for us here because we don't have Haste. But we have Red Surin. Why Red Surin? Well, because she does have the speed imprint. If you're wondering why mine is no imprinted, because I lost the one that I had imprinted. I don't know where it went. So luckily I had one just lying around that I put some stuff into here. So here are the stats. Again, you want to have at least 105 effectiveness. You want to have some damage here. These stats will obviously get better as you get more imprints. But let's go into the fight and see how this one works. Now, I do know from overall testing, this is lower damage than the Haste version and a little bit less safe, I would also say. However, for this one too, you can turn off the attack down because Surin will do it for you, and instead put on bonus damage or bonus healing, depending on which one you need. But otherwise, this fight plays out much in the same way as the ones with the Haste, only you have this red Surin instead. So we actually did pretty good damage here. Remember, we had the attack down turned off, and we had the bonus damage turned on. Now, you did not see it in the fight, but the Surin did die around the 20 turn marker, which is why she did, well, really no damage at all. The Mercedes really carried. Remember, that bonus damage did help quite a bit in her numbers overall. So if I was going to go on with Surin, I would probably raise the bulkiness up a little bit. Maybe opt for running a Tamarin front instead of a Hazel for this particular composition for a little more overall healing. Remember, you do need to get to that about 220 ER marker if you want to use a frontline unit, at least until you get to further down your Rift control tree, as one of them basically makes you ignore the skill cooldown thingy that the boss does. These do get kind of wacky as you go further and further down, which will open you up to more and more strategies, and eventually, I assume, you just want to one-shot the boss. But as of right now, if I could do it within 3 to 4 tries, I'm pretty happy with that. Now, let's look at some other potential units that you might want to use for this battle. Now let's go for a few other options you might want to use or have to use depending on where your account is right now. So, some players have been using Holiday Fiend, at least trying her out. I know I thought about it. In theory, it sounds okay. She has a nice attack up and CR push on her S3, and she can burn on her S1. Of course, you want to use something like Junkyard Dog to get more burns in and have your effectiveness up to snuff. Jacko is another unit that you might consider. Now, I didn't mention this during the mechanics because it never came up, but the boss does have a special mechanic where he does bonus damage to units that are stealth. This is put there specifically so Jacko would not be best in slot for the fight. But because of that particular mechanic, Jacko is pretty dangerous to use because if she's hit when she's in stealth, well, she dies. So if you can tune it perfectly, and when that never happens, go for it. Also, why is my Jacko missing a chest piece? Anyway, Ravi is an option that you could try too. Usually, instead of Charlotte, Ravi is maybe the one you want to go for. I would say Charlotte is the better option overall as her damage, and especially if some lifesteal stat, her healing is better than Ravi's S1. You basically just want to be an S1 the whole time. But an option nonetheless. I feel like more people will have Ravi built in Charlotte, so you can also maybe use, where is she? Melissa, she's okay with something like Bloody Rose. You have molds into her like I do and some damage also. Zella Carmen Rose is a free-to-play option, specialty change, where all her debuffs are basically non-existent because the boss is immune to all of them, but she can carry Bloody Rose, she can do pretty good damage overall, she buffs herself, free-to-play option, not the best thing in the world, but definitely usable. Shuna is okay. I tried her a couple of times. Her main issue is she can struggle keeping up healing overall compared to Hazel and Tamarin, but she does have a decreased attack, and she does also heal a little bit on the S1, which can be okay, and it is pretty easy for you to get to that 200 plus, or 220 plus effectiveness resist marker on her, if you have her. Cirilla is another unit that is usable in this. In fact, I would argue that she is one of the better units for this. The problem here is that she's more of a haste replacer and not a use alongside haste. I can't confirm this because I don't have Cirilla built right now. I actually used a lot of molas on different units, testing them out for this content right here. And unfortunately, Cirilla was the one that was kind of left behind. But if Cirilla turns out to be really good, I will happily put investment into her, as we waited 5 years for this unit to be good. And finally, I cannot believe I'm saying this, but apparently Godmother is also good for this content as an extreme free-to-play option. She's a ranger, she can carry Song of Stars, she has increased speed to the team, she has decreased hit chance and decreased attack, both things which do affect the boss, and she also set target on the S1. So yes, Godmother is viable for this Rift event. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. Remember, Rift is a new game mode and it's constantly being explored and tested, and I'm sure some things will change as the days go on. Of course, there is going to be the new unit coming out, Kane, which looks, again, especially tuned for this Rift. Anyway, I'm Wild Neptune. It's been a good one. Nep out.